Hello.
Hello, nice to see you, Sam.
Yeah, that's mutual. Since you're the one who invited me, so why don't you take charge?
Okay, I will. Something I'm used to. Okay. Um,
I suspected as much.
why do I give off that kind of aura?
Yeah.
Um, I'm sure you're used to taking charge as well.
Depends on the circumstances. Let's not get lurid on
No,
online.
let's keep it PG. There may be kids watching.
Yes,
Okay,
indeed.
so my name is Eve Tawfick. I'm a UK journalist, and I'm here with Dr. Sam Vaknin, who is an expert on narcissism, professor in psychology, and many more accolades that we could list right here. So today we're discussing financial crime and narcissism, fraud, the con man, and how that relates to narcissistic personality disorder. So we've got a few examples that everybody knows of. Bernie Madoff. You yourself suspect, although it's not been confirmed, that he may have narcissistic personality disorder. For those who don't know, Bernie in the 1960s created a Ponzi scheme based on penny stocks, and the fallout from that led to his son committing suicide. For their involvement with his scheme, they said that you know he everything he said was one big lie. So over to you, Dr. Vaknin. Why do you think that Bernie Madoff in particular is a narcissist?
We would make a much better use of the time if you were to call me Sam. Now, before I venture there, before I go there, I would like to take advantage of the opportunity, which is something I do habitually, and announce a seminar, a 3 days free seminar in Skopje, North Macedonia. You're all invited, all the viewers, and especially if you're a clinician. The topic of the seminar is recovery and healing from narcissistic abuse, evidence-based practices. So, what does the science tell us? As distinct from self-styled experts online. Okay, and onward, Jewish soldiers, to your question. Uh, I'm going to divide my answer in three parts, which is a Jewish thing, by the way. So I'm going to divide my answer in three parts. One bit would have to do with narcissistic traits and defenses. The other part would have to do with primitive defenses and childhood. And the third part would have to do with love. Actually, I think I would start with love, because love conquers everything, obviously.
It's a good place to start.
In psychology, we consider money to be a love substitute. When you receive money, it's as if the universe itself has embraced you, has accepted you, loves you. In the 17th century and the 18th century, Puritans, which were a kind of extremist Protestants, believed that being rich is an enunciation of God's blessing. In other words, if you're rich, you're chosen by God Himself. God, God chooses the rich. That's His blessing manifested. So from time immemorial, we associated money with luck, with love, with acceptance, with belonging. In other words, there's an emotional dimension to money, which is much neglected and much overlooked. We tend to emphasize the power that money gives us, the access, the glamour. But money is gratifying. Possessing money is not only about meeting your need, catering to your needs or your basic necessities. Possessing money is addictive because it's the equivalent of the whole world loving you. Money is a tangible proof of love received and love given. And so this is what the con artist plays on. When the con artist makes his moves, he is initiating a love affair. It's erotic. There's a pronounced erotic dimension to it, to this dance macabre between the conman and his victim. The conman is offering, as the name implies, confidence. Con is short for confidence. So he's offering confidence, he's offering trust, he's offering acceptance, he's offering belonging. It's a club of two or cult of two or three or four. So there is a kind of merger and fusion which is almost familial in character. It's like an enlarged or a substitute family. The victim steps into the trap, very often knowingly. Most victims actually act with trepidation, harbor suspicions, and develop paranoid ideation throughout the con. But they find the con irresistible because they're being loved, they're being accepted, they belong. There's someone they can talk to finally. They're extracted or extricated from their loneliness and isolation. So the con is not only about money. I would even say not mainly about money. The con is about an ersatz relationship, a kind of fake substitute relationship, which the victim finds irresistible. The bait is not profits, as people think. People think that, you step into the con and you give up all your pension fund or whatever because you want to make a fortune. That's not the case. People 80 and 90 years old fall for all kinds of fraud and so on. Not because they hope for huge returns in a non-existent future, but because they're lonely, they're isolated, they crave love, they're abandoned, they're neglected, they're overlooked. And finally, someone is paying attention to them, seems to care about them, inquires about their health and their life. And this is absolutely, as I said, a proposition that one cannot resist. And so this dimension of an exchange of love in erotic setting, which is reminiscent, clinically speaking, highly reminiscent of a love affair, underlies all financial fraud. And then there are the psychological aspects of the fraudster and the psychological aspects of the victim. The fraudster is usually possessed of a narcissistic psychopathic personality. It's a psychopathic narcissist, also known as malignant narcissist. This is someone who believes that he is above the law, that he is a law unto himself, holds himself in exceedingly high regard, perceives himself as godlike, as a self-concept which is essentially divine. He decides upon the fates and destinies of others, and he feels utterly entitled to do so. So there's a strong sense of entitlement. He's very contemptuous of people. He tends to blame the victims. He has alloplastic defenses. He says, they had it coming. They acted so stupidly. They deserve what has happened, what I did to them. So there's strong element of alloplastic defenses. There's a sense of immunity to the consequences of one's actions. Obviously, if you are godlike, you are unlikely to be punished or to be held accountable for anything you may have done. And your decisions are infallible and beyond doubt. So there is this narcissistic background, classic narcissistic background. It's common in intimate relationships, in friendships, and in financial relationships. So we call it financial abuse. And the victims, on the other hand, may be codependents, may be people pleasers, maybe, but the only thing common to all of them is isolation, depression. Most victims are actually in a depressive state when they fall prey to the con. Greed in some cases. In some cases it's greed, but not always. As I said, belonging to an exclusive club is much more important than the money. And both parties engage in fantasy. They create a joint or a shared fantasy. That's a clinical term. They create a shared fantasy within which there's a narrative. And the narrative is optimistic, hopeful, grandiose. And within the narrative, it's a feel-good narrative. And it defrays or it allays the isolation and the loneliness, the excruciating existential loneliness of these people. Even people who are surrounded by thousands of employees and hundreds of board members and what have you may still be exceedingly lonely. What the con artist is offering, in other words, and I could have been a lot shorter, but I like the sound of my voice. What the con artist is offering is friendship. It's based on friendship. He's offering
Well,
to be your friend.
listening to you now, Sam, I'm I was I'm a bit cautious about sharing this, but listening to you now has actually made me realize a lot of aspects to a con that I experienced myself, and it was a man who was in his 70s. He employed my services as a journalist to try and get money back from his daughter. He claimed she stole his money. Now, throughout the time I got to know him, I was making notes on his case, like as I do, getting the contacts I needed in order to, blow this case open. He was telling me stories constantly about people who had stolen from him, people who had taken money and how no one cares about him and they use him for money. And I looked at his surroundings. He had a small house, his clothes were always dirty. He didn't have much food in his fridge. And I was thinking, who's using you for money? That was my initial thought. But as time went on, I became eager to prove that I wasn't like these people. I'm not going to use you for money. I'm not even going to take, a cigarette from you if you offer it. I'm not going to. And over time, it was, oh, I'm at the emergency dentist. Can you send me £300? And I was like, well, I don't really have £300. And then he tried a different tack, oh, if you give me money, I can invest it and I can do this and I can get a car for you and I love you like a daughter. And he reminded me of my father. He was from Iran, my father's from Egypt, and they spoke very similarly. And over time I ended up giving him £2,000 and I don't know how that happened. And I realized that this man had spent his entire life frauding people, and it was quite scary how quickly and easily he had me trusting him, believing in him, this faux, as you say, shared reality, where, he said he loved me like a daughter. He didn't know me enough to love me like a daughter, but I played into that. There must have been some part of me that needed that. And I feel very embarrassed and ashamed about how that whole situation played out. And it's had to go no contact with him because he's still, you know, because I've cast him off, he's now saying things to people like he told me, I've taken money from him, I took advantage of him. That's not the case. He took my money and it will be reflected in his bank accounts. But yeah, just to cut it short, listening to you, it's made me really realize the process of these people and how easily they can get into your mind. And that brings me to another example popular in media, the Australian influencer Belle Gibson, who created her wellness brand, claimed she had brain cancer, claimed she had a tumor. And, as you say, it is about love. She had adoration from her fans. She had people messaging her every day, wishing her well, sending her gifts, all because she claimed she had cancer and she looked exceedingly well. And there were victims, and I will call them victims of her mantra that ended up taking on her way of life because they believed it could cure them of cancer, and it became a community which in the end Miss Gibson was found out, and it's become now this horror story, and it's a great one for journalists. They'd have a field day over it. I'd love to have done the interview with her. But what's your take on that in terms of using social media to create the fake reality in order to lure people in, and how it's so easy nowadays because we have access to this at our fingertips.
Before I come to social media, any relationship with a narcissist consists of fraud. And as I said, studies have demonstrated conclusively that the vast majority of fraudsters and scammers and so on and so forth have a narcissistic personality. And some of them are also psychopaths, so some of them are malignant narcissists. Um, but any relationship, even one which does not involve money, even when one where you are the recipient of money and benefits, is still founded on fraud,
Not emotional fraud.
emotional fraud, fantasy, the substitution of fantasy for reality and coercing you into the fantasy, or at the very least baiting you or luring you into the fantasy on condition that you suspend your reality testing, suspend your contact with reality, allowing the narcissist to become the only interface between you and reality, the only mediator, thereby granting the narcissist inordinate power over you. So when you fall in love with the narcissist, whether there's an intimate relationship or romantic involvement or whatever, when you're best friends with the narcissist, whatever, when you employ the narcissist, when you're employed by the narcissist, when you're the narcissist pastor or neighbor, it doesn't matter. It always involves an element of fraud because the narcissist would instantaneously generate a fantasy and then gradually, incrementally, or forcefully, depending on the character of the narcissist, would co-opt you into the fantasy, would force you into the fantasy, would make it a condition that you should adhere to the fantasy and acknowledge its reality, thereby denying yourself, lying about who you are and what you believe, disappearing into the fantasy and reappearing as a figment of the narcissist's mind, a prop in his theater production. So this applies not only to financial fraud, financial Freud. I almost said, right.
A
This
Freudian
applies
slip.
on, yeah, well, I wasn't that far off the mark, mind you.
You were
Okay.
not.
This applies not only to financial fraud. And when I read tip sheets, advice to people, how to not fall for a fraudster, how to not end up at the end of a Nigerian scam or whatever, these tips and advice are anywhere between unhelpful and irrelevant because they deal with the money. They deal with the external manifestation, with the end result, not with the process. The process is a process of seduction. It's a process of temptation. It's a love affair. It's a promise of friendship, companionship, understanding, acceptance, warmth, compassion, attention. That's the process. It culminates in money. Very often, the con artist himself is not interested in the money. He is interested in the conquest, the same way some people are interested in sexual conquest. Some con men and con artists are interested in conquering the next victim or the next target or the next mark because it elevates their sense of self-worth and self-esteem. It regulates their sense of self-confidence. It, in short, buttresses their grandiosity. They feel they feel godlike and elevated and euphoric and elated when they have hit upon another victim, taken his or her money or whatever. But it's even for these people, it's not really the money. Not really. I mean, ultimately, yes, they take the money, they use it, they go on vacations in the Bahamas and so on. But that's not the core issue. Catch me if you can, if you saw the movie. The guy was proud. He was proud of his exploits. It's an art form. He's an artist. He's professionally proud, the same way a medical surgeon would be professionally proud of his, surgeries. So,
So with the man that conned me, and I will call it a con because that's what it is. What in that case, if he wasn't interested in the money that I gave him regularly, and I also bought him food, all sorts of things. What was he interested in there? What was his aim? This is an old man. His wife had died of cancer 10 years prior. He was estranged from his daughter. Well, I don't know if he is a narcissist or a psychopath, but I feel he has elements from learning from your videos and other texts. I feel the elements are definitely there. But what was he after then in that case? What was it, companionship?
I don't know him well enough, of course. First of all, I didn't say it's not the money. I said it's not only the money.
Yeah.
So obviously the money plays a role, but the role the money plays has very little to do with greed and avarice.
Mm,
Law enforcement is getting this thing catastrophically wrong. Law enforcement all over the world, because they're normal people, basically. And they try to impose a commonsensical approach. And they say, well, con men take money from people. That means they're interested in money. End of story. So we're going to hamper this. We're going to impede this by educating the population to not give money to con artists. It's not about money. It's the psychological aspect is much more important. Take, for example, the Iranian guy you've just described. The money was there. I mean, he needed money probably for subsistence,
yeah.
and you became his meal ticket. And there was this aspect as well. But I would be very surprised if there was no form of attachment, not to you, but to the conquest of you,
Yeah.
to appropriating you, to annexing you. It's a little like the occupied territories in Israel. There is some emotional thing here. It's not political, it's not geopolitical, it's highly emotional, you know. And that's why, of course, we constantly fail in making peace in that area because it's highly emotionally charged. Same with this guy. I think there was some kind of emotion involved. And because money is the language of love, as I've explained at the inception of this video, when we were both much younger, money is the language of love. He would have expected you to give him money to prove to him that you love him. So it's a complex picture. He took your money because he needed it. He took your money because it made him feel good and superior to you. It aggrandized him. It elevated him over you. He felt godlike. But he also took your money because it reified, it embodied the bond between you. The money was proof positive that you are in it together, that you have a shared fantasy, that you are a family, that you're having a kind of love affair, not necessarily sexual, but you know what I mean? A kind of love between you.
Yeah. Like he would constantly reference his daughter, and it's.
Yes.
I think you would think the person with the money would have the power. So in these relationships, the person with the money is giving over, the power, so to speak. It's almost an inverse of what you would expect. It's the person who's lacking who is powerful because they are able to manipulate and play on someone's emotions in that manner.
Because the money is irrelevant here.
Yeah.
Love is. They possess the love, you possess the money. But what matters is love, not the money. What matters is not being alone. What matters is not being isolated. What matters is being listened to. What matters is being attended to compassionately. That is what matters. And he has it, and he had it, and you didn't. So he was in charge because he had the goods. You were buying something. You were bribing him into your life, basically. But I don't think that his utterances or his statements that you remind him of his daughter, or his new daughter, or whatever, I don't think they were 100% cynical or manipulative. I think in his mind, in the shared fantasy, you were gradually becoming his new daughter, but you had to prove it first. It's very reminiscent of narcissistic abuse. The narcissist abuses his partner because he wants her to prove that she loves him unconditionally. So he abuses her, he pushes her, he cheats on her, he betrays her, he does horrible things to her, but it's only a test. Would you still stick around? Would you still love me despite everything? You know? At
Almost
the
like a
same,
mother. They
sorry?
become they become the mother.
Mother,
I
yes.
think
Would you be
I
my mother?
remember in one of your videos you
Yeah.
said the victim becomes the girlfriend, the wife, then they have to become the mother at a certain
Yes.
stage.
But what is a mother? A mother loves unconditionally, never mind what. So now I have to test you, to test the intimate partner. I mean, is she really a mother or is she just faking it? Let's see. I'm going to abuse her, beyond human imagination. If she sticks around and she still loves me, then she is a true mother. I can trust her. I can relax and we can have something together. It's the same in a con. Same with a con artist. He's taking your money. And of course, it's about the money. And I'm not underestimating the role of money here. But the psychology of a con is highly complex, and to reduce it to money only is a catastrophic mistake, which is why people could keep falling in the traps, even though they're perfectly aware that there are fraudsters and scammers, and by now everyone knows. And true crime is all over the place. Everyone watches these series on television. Everyone knows about Nigerian scams, and still people fall for it. They don't fall for the Nigerian scam. They fall for the warm, understanding, embracing, kind voice on the other end of the phone. It's not about making $2 million in 20 days. It's about making $2 million in 20 days with this guy or for this guy. We're in it together. We're a unit. It's very, and it triggers primitive defenses. For example, magical thinking. There's a lot of magical thinking involved in a fantasy.
Didn't you say it was in one of your texts, the grandiosity gap? That's what reality creates. So they have to fill the grandiosity gap with something.
They have a fantasy. Now, each narcissist has a different fantasy because each narcissist is different, a different narrative. So one narcissist may have a fantasy of resuscitating or reviving or resurrecting his dead daughter. Could be a fantasy. Another narcissist may have a fantasy of living a luxurious, glamorous life and so on. Whatever the case may be. But when you dig down and you drill down deeper and deeper and deeper, it's about some deficiency in childhood, something missing, something that gnaws, something that drives the narcissist to try to make amends and compensate and make it whole again or make it great again. So there is this urge, uncontrollable urge to abscond with other people, other people's minds, other people's property, other people's bodies, to use other people as raw material in the master production of rebuilding my life as a con artist. The con artist is reconstructing his life time and again. And you can see another proof. I mean, I can point to another proof to this theory. The fact that con artists change identities all the time. They don't stick to one identity. Even a financial fraudster changes identities all the time. It's as if they're experimenting. Erickson, the famous psychologist, called it moratorium. He said that adolescence experiments with identities, sexual identities, gender identities, and so on, until they settle on something which kind of reflects them lifelong. And the con artist has never exited childhood or adolescent. These are very infantile people. So he's still experimenting. So he's going to be a pilot one day and a fund manager the next day. And, he's experimenting. He's trying on various costumes and various roles and various relationships and so on and so forth. Even Bernie Madoff, for example, who stuck to the same industry for decades, has changed dramatically within the industry. Because, for example, he was the chairman of NASDAQ, which is a stock exchange. But prior to that, he was a broker. Later, he was a fund manager. I don't know, you're not a financier, but brokers and fund managers are like predators and prey. This is a dramatic transition. It's a change of identity, complete. So even within the same industry, these people change identities all the time. They shapeshift all the time. And you are there to reassure them that they can still conquer, they can still succeed, and also to reassure them that there's no need for them to be alone, or they can always find someone to do this with, someone to legitimize their fantasy and tell them that it's real. someone to partake and participate in the fantasy, thereby rendering, fleshing it out. And how do you participate in a fantasy? You have to pay. There's an entry fee, you have to pay a price. You have to prove yourself. You had to prove to this guy that you're his daughter. His daughter would have given him money, wouldn't she? Because she
And brought
loved
him
you.
food and
Yeah, because
attended to him when he was ill.
that's
That
what
was
a
another
daughter,
thing.
that's what a daughter is supposed to do. So it was not about the money only. It was about fulfilling testing you in the role of a daughter. So I don't take it as cynically as some people might take it. They say, he told her she's his daughter in order to take her money. No, I think it was both. He wanted both. He wanted a daughter and he wanted money from the daughter. Had his real daughter been alive, he would have sucked her dry. He would have left her penniless.
I think that's what happened. His wife was very wealthy. She came from old money, as it was called, and I think he lived a very luxurious life on her coin. But once she had died, I think he ran through the money and he used various schemes, including benefit scams, in the UK, in order to receive money. And I think this shape-shifting aspect, one minute he was a hard-working builder, the next he was a student, the next he was this grand man who was rubbing shoulders with, royalty and lords and ladies. This was the story that he tells, and eventually you start to believe it. Even if you think you're clever, I never thought I was the type of person to be sucked in by a scam. And this has rather humbled me. I felt very raw and ripped apart after it. It was, even though it didn't go on that long, it felt like an absolute betrayal. It felt like, what on earth is going on here? Like, why have you done this? Why have you made everything nasty? There was no need. Um, so yeah, I think the victims in this case, like it can go really far. You can end up losing everything. There's a case in the UK at the minute. It's on Netflix. Graham Hornigold. He didn't know his mother from birth. He had no idea who she was. He was raised by his father, and in his 40s, this woman appears. I'm your mother, and she's very wealthy, and she treats him. She's staying at the Dorchester in London, and he's amazed. She's buying him cars and she's giving him all the love he never received as a child. He's completely sucked in. She starts to isolate him from his partner and his child, and we find out, big shock, that she's a scammer and she's investing in businesses, taking money from people, borrowing money from him. And the only reason this woman appeared in his life, and she is his biological mother, it was confirmed, was to take money from him. And that's incredible to think that a mother would seek out her child for the sole purpose of money. But I do think, as you say, there was a love element there. She was getting on in life. She was in her 80s, and I think she needed that love. But it took her a long time, and I just think it's quite incredible. It's not what you expect of a mother, that's for sure. But it just goes to show that these con artists, there's several levels to it. That is shape shifting. Everything you're saying is correct. Again, this woman has not been a confirmed narcissist, so I don't want to label her as such. But there are the elements there. The sucking in, the spoiling him with money, the showering him with gifts and attention. It does feel like a narcissistic seduction.
Yeah. I'll say something and then we have to kind of sign off and click on the same link and return.
Hmm.
The man or woman who hasn't been born who is immune to scamming and defrauding. The worst victims of scams are scammers. They're the most gullible by far. Because they're
Yeah.
narcissists, they hold themselves to be super intelligent and divine in their omniscience. They actually are the easiest marks. The easiest, they fall prey like nobody else. But it doesn't matter how well versed you are in financial fraud and so on and so forth. If you have emotional needs that are unmet, If you're hungry for some things, psychological things like love or acceptance, or then you are vulnerable. Then you're vulnerable, and I don't know of a single person who is totally immune to financial scamming. Not one. Let's let's hang up on and give it 5 minutes because it has to kind of record the file, and then in 5 minutes time we'll meet again.
Okay, see you in 5.
See you in
Thank you.
5. Bye.
Okay, dokes.
So one thing I think I have overlooked is the victim's grandiosity, the victim's own narcissistic defenses.
Okay.
What many con artists do, um, and notice the word artist. Yeah? What many con artists do, they project neediness. This is called in psychology control from the bottom. They project neediness, and then they make you believe that you are the only solution to their needs. Like you have a monopoly on catering to their needs. No one else can do it as well as you can, or no one else can do it, period. Only you. This, of course, this, of course, elevates the victim, makes self-aggrandizes the victim. The victim feels that she's somehow needed, that she's wanted, desired even, not necessarily sexually, but desired circumstantially. And so many people find this proposition irresistible because it's a form of idealization. If the con man, and usually it's a man, by the way, the vast majority, about 60, almost 2/3 of fraudsters and scammers are men. Only about 1/3 are women, and that is up dramatically from 40 years ago. 40 years ago, only 10% of fraudsters were women.
That's interesting, the increase.
The increase is owing to an increase in access. Women in the 1980s did not have as much access as they do today. Access to technology, access to finances, access to executive functions, and so on. But coming back to the point, a scammer or a con artist would convince you that you're the gift that keeps giving, that you're the solution to all his problems, that he's been waiting for you all his life, that he needs you, he cannot survive without you, that you revive in him something that has been long dead, or that you can somehow resurrect his past, his glorious past, and so on and so forth. And it caters to your own grandiosity, to your own narcissistic defenses, and you become addicted to narcissistic supply. It's an exchange of narcissistic supply here. He converts you into a narcissist gradually. But the more needy he is, the more clinging he is, the more helpless he is, the more hopeless he pretends to be, the more nostalgic, the more you step into the breach, inflating your chest and saying, I can make it right. I can fix this. It's a savior, healer, fixer, rescuer complex. It's a messiah complex, which the con man triggers in you. And this is what we call control from the bottom, because codependents do this as well. Codependents manipulate via their neediness and clinging. The codependent would tell you, I can't live without you. If you were not here, I don't know how I would have coped with this situation. You are the solution to all my problems. I've been waiting for you all my life. When you are here, I feel young again. You are exactly like my dead daughter. You're a new daughter to me. So you're fulfilling my needs as a father, And then, but the message is, there's only one of you. You're unique. You're idiosyncratic. It's not like you're interchangeable or exchangeable, or you're not commoditized. No, you're special. You are special. The message is you're special. How special are you? The very fact that you can gratify my needs, cater to my requirements, restore me somehow. That very fact proves how special you are. Because before you've entered my life, I had been dead. I was literally dead, and you revived me. That's a religious act almost. You have the powers of Jesus, you know. You resurrect people, Lazarus, the Lazarus effect, you know. And this is, I mean, who can resist this? You look at his mirror, you look at his mirror, and you fall in love with your idealized self. And then you say to yourself, I can't abandon this person. I can't because he will die or something bad will happen to him or he will never survive this. So you render yourself in your own mind indispensable. You make yourself into a kind of giver of life, the fount and source of happiness, exclusive source of happiness. Without you, it's all dark. It's all, and then you enter the scene and you bring light and joy and happiness and restoration and a glorious past, a revival, in effect, a renaissance.
Yeah, I'm definitely recognizing this, that, even some of the language, like, oh, I was dead before I met you, this kind of thing. And I think that's a common thing that is used in con artistry, especially the emotional type. So, the victim is then, as you say, they fall in love with a reflection reflected back as via the con man. And it's all leads down into this murky place that you don't realize it's murky. You think it's full of light and joy and happiness. But actually, you're in this murky place where someone's got their thumb over your head, but in such a way that you believe that they're, holding you gently. And it's quite scary to think that how easily it is done. And as you say, there is no one immune to con artistry. And the term itself actually was coined as a confidence man. That was the original,
Yes,
you know,
I
as
mentioned it. I mentioned it at the beginning that con means
yeah,
confidence. Yeah,
yeah. So
confidence plus.
a confidence man. That was it was written in a newspaper, and it became. I think you have to have this element, this almost bullish confidence, in order to get away with this. And if you're shy, if you're somehow hesitant, you're not going to be able to convince people that they're, what you want them to know. So it's almost like they take on this grandiose persona, and it becomes attractive to you because it's not something you commonly see. We don't see people with, exuberant confidence every day. Therefore, when we do come across it, it's very attractive, it's very interesting. Most people, are awkward or shy, or they've got some sort of social quibbles that we don't understand, or maybe they're neurodiverse, and they're concerned about being in public. That's not to say everybody who's neurodiverse is, awkward or shy, but it's commonly seen in people with ADHD and autism. But everybody seems to have their own difficulty, and that this shining person almost seems like a fantasy, like something out of a movie, and it becomes interesting. You want to know this person, you want to hear what they have to say, because it's alien to you.
Conman originally meant that the scammer could elicit your confidence in him, that he establishes trust so that you can trust him. Not that he was confident, but that he could have your confidence. But you're right that one class of scammers are narcissists, grandiose narcissists, and they exude self-confidence, a vision, goal orientation, a direction. I know what I'm doing. Trust me, rely on me. I'm going to get you there, and so on. But there is another class of scammers, and they actually leverage victimhood. They leverage victimhood to obtain the very same outcomes. So they cast themselves not as overconfident and visionary and goal-oriented and so on, but the exact opposite, as hapless victims, as hurt, traumatized, damaged children, as people in need of help and succor and support. And so this is what many narcissists do. They expose you to their inner child and the alleged, ostensible inner child. It's an imitation, it's a simulation. But you begin to see the narcissist as a child, a traumatized, broken, crying, hurt child. and you want to embrace this child, you want to help this child, you want to make this child whole with your love. And that creates a bonding, mother-child bond, which is one of the fiercest and strongest in nature. And so when you come across someone like your con artist, his message was not necessarily, I'm super confident, I have a vision, I'm going to make you rich. His message was, I've been victimized and molested by life and people in it, in my life.
Yeah, it was all about how he had been, somehow scammed himself
Yes.
and how unwell he was and how many difficult things he had survived. And,
So
it was very,
there are two messages here. One type of scammer says, you need me. That type of scammer comes to you and says, I can double your money in 4 weeks, but only I can do that. So you need me. But the other type of scammer says, I need you. I need you. Without you, I cannot survive. Or you make my life so much better. So I need you. These are the two messages. Either you need me or I need you. Both of them lead to a breach of trust and heartbreak. So whenever, here we can come up with a universal tip, a universal piece of advice.
yeah.
Whenever the relationship involves neediness or the expression of need, your need or the other party's need, doesn't matter. Walk away. A relationship that's founded on need is a scam. So if you come across someone who says, I can double your money, but you need me to do that, the minute he uses the word need, walk away. Or if you come across someone who says, now that I've met you, I know that you complete me and I need you in my life. The minute he uses the word need, walk away. Need is the number one red alert and warning sign. Just walk away. Relationships should never ever be founded on needs, on the fulfillment of needs, catering to needs, subjugation by needs, neediness, and so on and so forth. These are very rotten foundations for a relationship.
Is there a different type of need though that is safe? So for instance, we're in a relationship, I'm with somebody and my needs aren't being met, say sexually, emotionally, etc. And I go to that person expressing that need. Would you say we have to differentiate between a healthy type of need, or is it a blanket, if there's any type of need, we need to be cautious?
Need is always pathological. A need means that you possess some implicit right that imposes some kind of obligation on the other party. So if you say, for example, I need sex, it's what actually you're saying is, I have a right to have sex, and you have the obligation to provide it to me if we are in an intimate relationship. And this is the incel, the message of incels, you know? In the incel community, they say we deserve sex because we need sex. Neediness and needs are always pathological. I think people are confusing needs with expectations or needs with wishes. I wish to have sex or I expect to have sex. That's different. When you say I need something, that's emotional blackmail. That's extortion. You could walk to your partner, go to your partner and say, here's a list of my expectations if I am to stay in this relationship. Or these are my demands. It's legitimate. Or these are my wishes.
Yeah, what you're saying makes complete sense. It's
But
almost,
neediness is blackmail. If I tell you, listen, I need you, I can't live without you, it sounds very romantic, but I'm actually blackmailing you. Because the flip side of this statement is, if you walk away, I will die. You have my life in your hands. I make you responsible. I'm extorting you. This is not okay. It's not legitimate and it's pathological. So whenever you come across an expression of need, walk away. The relationship is rotten, will end in heartbreak. That's how I see it. That's at the foundation of scamming. In scamming, there's an exchange of needs. You need me because I can make you rich, or I need you because you are my dead daughter. Period.
That's really interesting. I think that's great advice as well. I wouldn't necessarily have looked at scamming in that way and expected scamming to have such duality. Normally, we just hear of there's money involved, it's an abstract person extracting money from a vulnerable human being who is lonely. And that's how we see fraud and scamming, the Tinder swindler, the relationships where women go abroad and they come back with a new husband and find out that he's actually married with children elsewhere and using her for money. This is quite commonplace, and that's how I've always seen conning and fraud throughout my life.
Well,
And I,
there
I
is this,
expect it
there is
to
that as well. But if you were to analyze, for example, the Tinder swindler, you would have seen everything that I've just said. The use of emotions, including emotional extortion, the neediness, I mean, you would, everything, the isolation, the loneliness, the aggrandizement of both the scammer and the victim. Um, because the Tinder swindler put himself in situations where only the victim could save him. I mean, he claimed to have been in situations where only the victim could save him. This swindler engineered situations where the victim felt empowered and aggrandized somehow. I don't know if you remember the film. There were
I do,
It was
yeah.
like kidnapped. It was like kidnapped by, if you remember. And he
Yeah,
called this woman and he told her, "Listen, I'm all bloodied." He was bloodied, and it
my
was
enemies. It was
my
all about
enemies, this, that. I
my
need some
enemies.
money to. So only you can save me. The message is only you can save me. I need you.
Isn't that a narcissistic element as well? If somebody claims to have an enemy or a nemesis, this is a narcissistic element.
He didn't have any enemies. It was all staged. It was
Yeah, we claim because who really has a nemesis in real life? We don't go around, with
He
Darth
was,
Vader,
but
etc.
his claims were grandiose claims that he's an heir to a diamond empire, that he has private jets and so on. So he came up with a grandiose narcissistic narrative to start with, so everything fitted in. But it doesn't have to be the Tinder swindler with a private jet. It could be an old man who claims that you could revive his past. You could make him alive again. And only you can do that. And that he needs you. And if you were not there to take care of his needs, he's going to end badly, in a bad way, or maybe even die.
Yeah, well, I was told the man in question, the man told me that he had 6 months to live,
Yeah,
and
classic.
he's still alive now. Way
He's going to outlive you in all probability, but yeah.
Yeah, he will most likely outlive me, and be at my funeral telling everyone how I
Oh,
stole.
you stole his money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Abused him. You're a scammer. Yeah.
I'm the real con artist
Yeah,
here.
you're the swindler.
That's it. I'm the female Tinder swindler.
Yeah, the Tinder swindler.
That's it. That's it. It's been fun.
Swinderella.
That's really good, actually. I might add that to my
Oh, Swinderella is a great thing. Swinderella.
It is. It's brilliant. But I won't be I can't remember the last time I even used Tinder. I think it's become quite bleak now. A bleak
And
place.
we think of scams only in terms of one-on-one or one-on-few. But scams could and very often are on a national level. So, for example, if you come with a scam that says the past was much better than the present, we have had a glorious past, and I'm the only one who can revive it for you. You need me to revive this glorious past, this unblemished, impeccable past that we all used to share. Well, that's a swindle. That's a scam
So like,
because it uses nostalgia. It's counterfactual. This alleged past has never existed. And it includes the element of neediness. Only I can make it come true. Only I can revive this past for you. And you need this past because your present sucks. This is, of course, make America great again.
and the UK as well. I think there's an element of, we had a great past, and we were a great nation, and now everything's terrible, and we need to go back to the 1950s and 60s, where people had values and there was propriety, etc. But yeah, it's the same as Make America Great Again. We haven't got a catchphrase yet, but it's the same thing, and I see people being nostalgic for the times of old. But they weren't there. They didn't see the 70s with the rubbish on the streets and the lack of available, even funeral services were difficult to obtain. So this glorious past is being viewed through a lens of, you know, as you say, look, con artistry.
It's a scam. It's a swindle. Make America Great Again is possibly the greatest swindle in human history. Nazi Germany, of course, Nazi Party was a swindle. These are
Hmm.
all scams. These are all swindles because they use the twin elements of counterfactuality, some fantasy, which has nothing to do with reality, and neediness. You need me, or you need the past because your present is unsustainable, or there's a need somewhere, you know.
Like, if we look at North Korea,
Mm.
you've got apparently Kim Jong-un was born under two rainbows at the top of a mountain, and Jesus was there, and everybody was singing and playing harps, and they tell on the news, they speak of we've got an abundance of crops, we've got loads of shops, we've got loads of money. Look at our supermarkets, and it is an absolute scam. They've got fake displays in the supermarket windows. The people are starving and crawling over the border to China to escape, in forced labor camps, etc. We all know the story. But I think it's an incredible scam, and I can't believe they're still saying it and the
Yeah,
people are
but if
buying.
you were to talk to a North Korean and suggest that Kim Jong-un should be deposed or executed or something, they would panic because he instilled in them the belief that they need him in order to survive. The exchange of needs is at the core of every swindle and every scam. So now all the North Koreans believe they need their great leader to survive. Even if they're starving, even if they're dying in a famine or whatever, they still need him. They cannot imagine a world without him. Same in the United States. Donald Trump's base cannot imagine a United States without Donald Trump. They need him because he's the great protector of the United States. He's being compared to Jesus Christ. I'm kidding you not. He's going to revive a glorious past and so on and so forth, and only he can do it. So they need him. And he tells them in return that they need to revert to the past. It's their need. He's helping them with their need. Exactly as a con artist would tell you, you need money, right? I can make it for you. You have a need, and I'm your solution, and I'm your exclusive solution. No one else can double your money in 4 weeks. So I think this element of neediness is underestimated. Law enforcement, the FBI and all these, law enforcement focus on the transaction. But the transaction, albeit not immaterial, is relevant. The transaction is like 20% of the issue. 80% is the psychology. The psychology culminates in a transaction. But you know what? Marriage is a transaction. Would we reduce marriage to the contract? No. Marriage is very complex. There is romance, there is intimacy, there's child rearing. So it's like reducing marriage to the marriage contract. Reducing a scam to the exchange of money is like reducing marriage to the marriage contract. Consequently, no one knows what they're talking about. They're giving wrong advice. It's a bloody mess. Simply bloody mess. And there are no incentives, institutional incentives, to not scam, to not swindle, which could have easily been instituted had there been a proper understanding of what is a scam, a psychological process that culminates in a symbolic exchange of money. The money is a symbol. It's not the core. It's not the main issue in a scam. It's a symbol. You can find many super wealthy, very rich scammers who continue to scam. It's not about money. They need to scam. It fulfills, you know, They need it. It aggrandizes them. They feel great with all the conquests. They think they're super clever. They need to scam, and the victims need to be scammed. It's a meeting of the minds, meeting of needs.
What about the cases such as Belle Gibson mentioned earlier? You know, her scam was more based on lying about having an illness, and we've seen this a few times within celebrity. You know, there was a teacher in the UK. She pretended to have cancer and shaving her head. You know, she took advantage of the school raising funds for her and went on holiday with the money. I think Russell Brand even admitted that, you know, he pretended to have cancer or some such disease while he was working somewhere, and again used the money to go on holiday. This is seems less about the money and more about people gathering to feel sorry for this incurable illness, which you know is quite disgusting from the outside to look at.
As I said, there are two types of scammers, and the second type makes use of victimhood, leverages victimhood. Now, when you have cancer, you're the victim of your biology or the victim of the world. You're a victim in any case. You know, so there's an element of victimhood. You could be victimized by people, you could be victimized by psychological processes. For example, you could be born mentally ill and, poor you. You could be victimized by biological processes. You have cancer. There's no end to the manifestations of victimhood. But the second type of scammers are needy. They're needy. They need something. They need your sympathy. They need your donations. They need something from you. While the other type of scammer convinces you that you need something from him. So either you need something or they need something. Either way, it's a scam because it involves needs and neediness, which I think is a very useful thing to bear in mind when you next come across someone who needs something from you.
Most definitely. I mean, it's an interesting way to look at things as well, and I think it will change definitely from my perspective, and I hope others, the way that people like this are viewed, as opposed to, as you say, just being in it for the money.
Look, we have just scheduled a Zoom to imagine. I mean, I told it's legitimate to tell you, listen, I really wish we could have an interview or a talk. I really wish we could talk, on camera and so on and so forth. That's an expression of wish. It's legitimate. I could even say, based on our common history, and I'm talking about journalistic activities, not to give rise to any gossip, based on a common history of journalistic collaboration and so on and so forth, I would even expect you to say yes if I'm proposing a talk. It's an expectation, and to some extent, legitimate expectation. But imagine that I came to you and I said, I need you to have this talk. I absolutely need you to have this. And if you don't, I'll fall apart.
Yeah.
And you will be responsible if I fall apart. So now I need you to, you would admit that it doesn't sound legitimate.
Sorry. No, it doesn't. And I'd be quite concerned if you came to me saying, you know, I need you to have this talk or I'm going to fall apart. I'd be like, what's going on? Is something happened? You know, but as you say, the expectation feels healthy. Need feels very unhealthy, especially when you describe it in that manner. And the same if I came to you, you know, I need to have this Zoom call. If I don't,
No,
I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna,
no.
get upset.
That would make me feel in charge of your well-being. That
Yeah.
would make me feel responsible.
What would you do with that? I mean,
And that's the definition of extortion. Now, I may succumb to your need because I don't want you to cry. So I may succumb to your need. But that would be a scam. That would amount to a scam
well, I've
because,
I've scammed you.
sorry?
What, I've scammed you with my
Yeah,
need.
that would
Yeah,
amount to a scam because you're very unlikely to have cried had I said no, and so on and so forth. And above all, I am not responsible for your well-being.
you are not. No.
Appointing me unilaterally as your guardian, the guardian of your welfare, that's assigning to me a role which is illegitimate and absconding with my resources, for example, my time. which is the equivalent of taking my money away. So that
Yeah,
amounts to a scam.
time is money. And I do think, if I were to behave in that way, it's almost what I would call a borderline behavior.
Apropos, you said time is, yes. Yes, very true. Borderline behavior involves, and codependency as well, involves what we call control from the bottom, which is extortion via neediness. You just mentioned time is money, which is a very interesting sentence. Some scammers invest time rather than money in the scam, so or expect time rather than money. So some scammers would scam you into giving away your time, your energy, your availability, your access, your contacts, your power, your sexuality, your sex. Scams, scams, not all scams center around money. There are people who scam other people for sex on a habitual, regular basis. They actually invest money in the scam. They
I
don't get
feel
money out of the scam. They invest money in the scam.
scamming for sex, I feel, has become a commonplace thing within misogynistic behavior. I think the patriarchal society sort of implemented that in the mind of males, that scamming for sex is almost a normal behavior. I know of people who've, pretended to be a prince in a nightclub and had their friend outside as a driver with a hat on in order to get laid. And, people who pretend to be, a profession that they're not, they're in the Royal Marines, they're a doctor, whatever, in order to get a woman into bed. But I do feel this has been normalized to an extent. And, a female scamming for sex would be looked, should be called the Black Widow, something of this sort. So I do feel this scam is one that we view as well. Something we as women have to protect ourselves from because it's not going to go anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, but it's important to understand that scams and swindle, it's not all about money. It's about, and that's why the emotional component of scamming is very crucial, very important, because it doesn't always culminate with money and ends up with money. It could be, someone could scam you because you have access to sources and resources. I don't know, you're a politician and you have access to all kinds of decision makers, so they would scam you. There have been such cases for example, American history. In the 1970s, there was a famous sting operation by the FBI where politicians were scammed into providing access and so on. So scamming is any exchange of goods, whether monetary or not, within the framework of neediness of either side or both. You could have a woman, we could have someone who befriends a very rich person and for years and sometimes decades spends time with this rich person and caters to the needs of this rich person, takes care of this rich person, this wealthy person, and becomes a family member and never asks for a penny in return. It's just good friendship, fully expecting to be rewarded in the will and testament.
Yeah, with inheritance.
Yes, that is a form of scamming because no real emotions are involved. But admittedly, it's speculative because it may end up without any money. I mean, so money is there sometimes, but reducing all forms of fraud to money is wrong, and ignoring the psychology is dead wrong. Like you get it completely wrong in this case. That's how I see it.
It's been very interesting. I think we've almost run out of time here,
Yeah, we have.
but it's
And
been a
and the
pleasure.
viewers' patience probably.
And I hope not. I hope it's been as informative to the viewers as much as it has been to me. And thank you as always for your insights.
Thank you.
It's all
Always good to see you.
it's always good to see you too. And happy Easter.
Thank you. Happy. I'm, are you Christian?
Technically, my
Yeah.
family is Coptic, so
All
yes,
right. The Christians, the originals. Yeah.
the Oh, yeah, the real Egyptians.
The real Egyptians, indeed.
I'll get in trouble for saying that. I'm joking. That was a joke.
Yes, that was a joke. They are not the real Egyptians.
We're not.
Okay, I'm a Jew, so for me it's happy Passover, but thank you all the same.
Happy Passover. I hope you have a lovely one. Take care.
Take care, you too. Bye.
Bye. Bye.